Now when you think of creepypastas, what do you think of? Maybe Jeff the Killer, a teenager who gets bullied constantly and then gets burnt by acid, disfiguring him. He then gets revenge against him. Or maybe Slender Man who kidnapped kids. He is the most successful creepypasta, as he had many games and a not so good film. No, this isn't edited. There was a real scene in the film. Marble Hornets done better, and that was a YouTube series from 15 years ago. The film adaptation of Slender Man released just 6 years ago. Shame on you, Slender Man film. No wonder why it only managed to snag a 3.3 out of 10 on IMDb, and only 8% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is generous. Or you may know Sonic.exe, which is probably the most controversial creepypasta, of which is now known for the creator's horrid acts, but without the creator's terrible allegations put against them, the creepypasta already was a
pile of shit.
Creepypastas really vary in quality. Like, I don't think a single creepypasta is scary. Not one bit. And no, this isn't me coping about me shitting bricks as a young 8-year-old watching a guy with a shitty microphone with a deep voice narrating the OG Jeff the Killer creepypasta. That shit was terrifying at the time. I think creepypastas fall onto a scale of good and bad. I consider Candle Cove as a decent enough creepypasta and Sonic.exe as a god-awful creepypasta. And no, Jeff the Killer is not in here, although the original creepypasta is not garbage with multiple spelling mistakes and grammatical errors. Neither is Plankton God served it's because of this. I fucking love this image. Best image on the internet. So without further ado, I present to you.
That is one big pile of shit.
It was just this Christmas 2013 that went by. Things were getting busy. I had to start buying presents for the whole family. I had just finished shopping, but I still needed to grab a present for my little cousin. She is not very hard to shop for since she is 4. She likes things like Peppa Pig and My Little Pony. She really liked, and I say liked for a reason, Max and Ruby. So when I decided to go looking for a present, I figured a Max and Ruby DVD would have been the perfect gift since she liked to watch it daily. However, Christmas meant that many of the online DVDs were sold out on most places. I went to look on eBay as well, but I figured not to trust what the condition the DVDs could have been in. I was stuck in a rut for quite a while until that package arrived. I was at home still scrolling for a stupid DVD until I heard the sound of something being pushed into my letterbox. I caught a hold of it before my dog did and looked at the package. It seemed to have been wrapped quite poorly, and what looked like grease marks and stains on it, naturally as anyone would. I opened the package. Inside was something I could not explain. It was a Max and Ruby DVD, but I had never seen one like it online. It was some little kid had drawn on the front cover with a marker. The title just said Max and Ruby with what looked to be a poorly drawn illustration of Max and Ruby on the front. There were no names or anything but on the back. It had a list of 4 episodes, all with blunt titles. Episode 001, Episode 0002, Episode 003, Episode 004. I quickly gave the DVD a watch over. To my surprise, all the episodes were in perfect quality and seemed to have no flaws. It was almost as if it was the real DVD with just a homemade cover. The only thing that was off was the episode selection screen. The episodes had names, but they were titled Max and Ruby 1, with all the numbers being changed as it went down the list. The actual selection of the screen was just a white screen with black text. Nothing else. After giving it much thought, I decided to change the cover to something a little nicer by printing out a DVD cover that I had found in Google and tracked down and the names of the episodes so they were labeled correctly. So I left the episode list screen alone because I figured it was self-explanatory. Christmas went by, and all things were perfectly fine. I gave my little cousin her DVD. She was happy with it all throughout Christmas, but that was only because she hadn't watched it yet. On Boxing Day, the family had gone out for lunch, and I was babysitting my cousin. I was not that bothered about being left alone. I figured now was a good time to put on the DVD for her. I had put the DVD in and allowed it to play while I ate. From what I heard, She watched 3 episodes so far. I was just about to finish my food when I suddenly heard shrieking coming from my cousin. I sprinted in and saw her bawling her eyes out. My heart was in my throat. I caught a glimpse of one of the most horrifying things I had ever seen. It was what appeared to be a frame of Max and Ruby standing next to each other. It was complete and utter darkness. They had a lack of any facial features. They didn't have noses or mouths. Their eyes were gaping black holes, the colors were bloody red, and a static ring buzzed. The sound was replaced with a sound almost reminiscent of the main theme, but backwards, with that same static buzz faintly playing in the background. It had to be one of the most disturbing things I had ever seen before. It was probably had been on there for 20 seconds before the screen turned black. Somehow, our television screen turned off. I had to calm my cousin down by telling her it wasn't real, and that it was probably a figment from one of her nightmares. My parents had rung me up and told they were going to be gone all night. So this was going to be a perfect time to investigate this shit. I didn't mention it to them though. I opened the DVD's files on my laptop, and the once called episode 004 was renamed to Rip Mommy and Daddy. A bit unnerving to say the least. My cousin was now fast asleep with my earbuds, so he couldn't hear a peep. Normally, Max and Ruby episodes are in a trilogy format. They'd have 3 stories in one episode. This one has 1. It started quite cheery. Max and Ruby were playing tag in the garden. Their parents were watching them on the porch. Something was a bit off. The sound was playing in reverse. Soon their faces became emotional and in deep sorrow. The father said, "It's such a shame. Rip Mommy and Daddy." It then suddenly was cut short. A sound of static was the thing that cut it short, then a loud scream. Such scream was followed by the sound of 2 people being choked. It sounded almost realistic. It made me almost physically sick. The scene was then switched to both Max and Ruby standing in front of what looked like a gravestone labeled Rip Mommy and Daddy. The 2 of them had no faces still. At this point, there was also no sound apart from faint static. This scene remained on screen for about a minute and a half before it cut to black. It then changed scene again now, showing Max and Ruby sitting in Ruby's room. Both of them were sobbing. The sobs were so realistic and heart-wrenching that it sounded like it was recorded from a real person mourning. It was like audio from a snuff film. What happened next was the most revolting things I have ever witnessed, yet somehow also sad. The scene changed to Max in his room. He was standing on a chair with a noose hanging from his ceiling. He placed the noose around his neck. Tyler the Creator Yonker style. The scene turned to black yet again as the static loomed louder, almost instantly after. Ruby walked into her brother dead. She let out a loud scream as the background turned black. The camera panned on her face as the sound of a chair being kicked and the same choking again. The picture of Ruby's face remained on the screen for maybe about 5 minutes. This time, her eyes returned to the gaping black holes. Ruby began to cry. Static soon drowned out her tears. The scene cut to black again, with the load static resuming. When the screen returned, Ruby was standing now on her own in the garden by 2 gravestones. One was labeled Rip Mommy and Daddy and Rip Brother. At this point, I had already been sick and sitting. Shaken, the episode seemed to have come to an end finally as an old computer sound ringed out. I was about to eject the disc when the same image appeared on the TV. This time, it had text. The text wrote, "Death is our only release." There were no credits. It stayed on it for a few seconds before it finally ejected. I sat trying to comprehend what had happened. In my shock and fear, I made the foolish decision to break the DVD into the smallest bits, and then I put the crumbs of the once DVD into a drainage system. Thankfully, I kept a few screenshots and saved them to my laptop. The next couple days went past. They were normal. I felt relieved. I although did have a few nightmares on that fucking DVD. But that was all. My cousin is with the rest of her family. I heard what sounded like someone posting through the door. The DVD had long since left my mind. I hadn't told anyone still. It all came flooding back to me when a letter stood in front of me. It wrote, "Death is our only release." I'm sorry, but that was one of the biggest wastes of time ever recorded in history. It follows the average formula for a shitty creepypasta. Last episode tick, death or gore tick, and death of a beloved character tick on the creepypasta scale. I'd give it a 2 out of 10. Next creepypasta. Have you ever heard of Thomas the Tank Engine? If you have been around little kids between the ages of 2 and 7, I'm sure you have. My son adored Thomas so much that he could name every single train, knew what color they were, and the number they had painted on them. I was glad when I heard that he was coming to visit me over the summer, but I had a ton of work to do, so I bought him a Thomas DVD. The cover looked innocent enough. What was also interesting was that Thomas was smiling and little wooden children were waving their arms out the windows of the coaches. The DVD was called Thomas and the Children. He was so excited to see that DVD that right off the bat he pleaded with me to pop it in the DVD player. I went to work while he watched it. After a few hours he came into my office looking as pale as a sheet of paper. "Dear Daddy?" He spoke, his voice seemed weak. "Are you okay?" I asked. I touched his head. His temperature had significantly went up. Why did Thomas kill the children? My heart sank like the Titanic. "I'm sure Thomas didn't kill the children," I assured him. "Now you need rest and some medicine." I gently skirted him off to his room. "Come on now." After putting him into bed, my curiosity would kill the cat. I popped the DVD in the player, and the episode began to play. It was your normal episode. The beginning focused on Thomas having to take kids to the seaside. Something was odd. This episode had no narration by either George Carlin, Ringo Starr, Michael Angelis, or even Michael Brandon. No narration whatsoever. The rest of the episode showed Thomas picking up the children. It showed every child aboard the coach. There is a scene of his usual self zooming down the tracks like his usual self with the kids cheering. Now usually if a situation goes bad, the narrator would say, "Then there was trouble," and in this occasion, the situation was worse than an Englishman reading of a script. Bertie the bus was stuck on the rails. This is when the episode got a bit peculiar. Bertie stared at Thomas in fear. At that little blue engine has a maniacal smile and started to speed up. Thomas started to laugh. The kids started to cry. Little tears dripped from their wooden faces. Thomas then violently smashed into Bertie. Pieces flew everywhere. Usual, the narrator would say, luckily no one was hurt. But there was no recurrence for the kids. The episode then showed the carnage that occurred inside the coaches. Limbs, blood, and heads all over the coaches. Saddest of all, they still had tears on their face. Everything went static. I was fueled with anger. What maniac would create something like that? I paused. Suddenly messages started to appear: kill, obey, manipulate, and die. Before going to bed I checked on him. He was in a deep sleep, snoring loud. He had his teddy bear snuggled tight to him. This shit gave me nightmares, one where one of the children was in my room, but they were almost human. They tore my limbs apart with that bastard of a train chuckling in the near-distant background. I awoke with blood covered head to toe. I had a knife in my hand. I'm scared to check my son's room. The final paragraph reminded me of this scene from the 1980 classic Maniac. Before we get into the third and final one, I have to be honest, this isn't bad. I think it's one of the best creepypastas, so I added it to garner more attention. Okay, enjoy the third and final entry. In the summer of 2013, I found myself driving home alone on Highway 902 from a party. It was almost midnight, and needless to say it was pitch black. As was usual at night, I was on edge. I had the radio off and could hear nothing but the muffled roar of tires on pavement and the dull hum of the engine. I stole a glance into the middle rearview mirror and saw nothing but darkness through the back window. I know that I looked backward and saw nothing. I'm sure of it. Just the seemingly endless blackness of the night. I remember so clearly because not 10 seconds later, a car passed me to the left, headlights on. I had one of those sudden adrenaline rushes like when you think you see someone outside of your bedroom window, but it's just a tree. 10 seconds earlier, nothing had been behind me. But suddenly a car somehow appeared. I drove home shivering in fright. The next morning, I found two sets of scratches near the back of my van. One was on the left rear, one was on the right. The car was pretty old. They could have been there for months, but that was the first time I distinctly remember seeing them. In hindsight, there are two possibilities for what happened that night. Possibly one, by some glitch in reality or something paranormal. The other car had somehow appeared behind me within 10 seconds of me checking my mirror, like some weird ghost crap or something. However, the second option makes my blood run cold whenever I consider it. It didn't even occur to me until months after the fact, but it makes me dread driving alone at night even more. The car was normal. It had approached me from the rear and passed me to my left. However, something large and wide and as black as the night had been clinging to the rear of my car, obscuring my view through the window and leaving deep scratches on the sides, and I had inadvertently driven it home with me. Edgar Wright video is now releasing on the 8th of November. Be there or be a Mr. Maker Square.